Well, I couldn't have picked a more beautiful day. It's raining here. I'm going to replace a wheel bearing on the front wheel on a 96 Dodge Neon. Step one is gather up your tools. Got to have a jack. Should have some wrenches, some sockets. And step one, we're going to take the wheel cover off. Okay, next thing we need to do is remove this cotter pin. Take this off here, break this loose. Recommend using some penetrating lube, and then we're going to break all the lug nuts loose and then jack it up so we can take off the wheel. Okay, I've got the cotter pin out and the retainer off the outside. Next thing I do is break the nut loose. Recommend having a nice long cheater bar because sometimes these things are incredibly tight. So here we go. Yeah, it's about a 5-foot cheater bar. Sometimes you need that. Nope, that one came loose pretty easy. Alright, so I'm going to back that nut off, and I'll take the wheel off and I'll get it jacked up. Okay, the bolts we're going to need to remove, parts we're going to have to take off is this caliper. It's going to have to come off here. There's 2 bolts, 10mm bolts on the back. We'll screw right off. The tie rod end will have to be disconnected. The 2 strut bolts are going to have to come out, and then down below, I don't know if you can see it here, but the ball joint nut's going to have to come up. It's a bolt that goes through like a pin on there. So you got to take that bolt out of there. Get all those out, you'll be able to take the control arm off. Okay, I got all my nuts off. These are splined inside of here, so you can just whack them with the hammer, they'll come out of there. Might recommend putting the nut on there if you're worried about bunging up the bolts. Okay, those 2 are out. I also need to get this out down here. I'm going to whack it a couple times with the hammer. That should pop loose. Okay, the big cheater bar does come in handy for another thing. I'll use it to pry down on this lower control arm. It gets it out of the strut tower, and then also you need to shift it forward, and then we're going to lift it up out of the lower ball joint. Try to do this using my foot. Yeah, I'm going to have to shut this off for a second. I'll use a pry bar to lift that up and off of the lower ball joint. Okay, I got it off the lower ball joint. All I have to do is slide this off of here, and I'm free from the vehicle. I have the control arm. Then we're headed to the press. Okay, to take this hub apart, you need to do 2 presses. The first press is going to push the hub out of the center, and the second press is going to push the bearing out. After you push the hub out, you'll have a snap ring to remove on the other side. Some of the newer ones have a plate with about 3 or 4 bolts that hold it in. So for our first press, we're going to have a socket that's going to push on the center part of the hub. Just press that right out of that housing. So here we go. I did use a piece of pipe. It's like, I don't know, 7 or 8 inch pipe. Press the hub down through it, makes it real super easy. And we're out. I'll show you what I just did here. Now we have the hub out, and we have a race stuck on there. We'll have to get that race out. In order to do that, I use a cutting tool, a whizzer wheel, and we're going to put a slice in that race. That'll look something like this. Then we'll use a chisel and split it, and it'll slide right off of there. I use my whizzer wheel and cut a nice little slice into the race. I'm going to give it a couple of whacks with a chisel and see if it breaks. I'm trying to crack it. Be careful doing this part because these areas right here will have a tendency to come flying out of there like a bullet, so stand off the side and have safety glasses on. Okay, I did crack it and a couple of chips did go flying, but now it's loose on there. And I can just slide that off of there. A couple of taps with a hammer and that'll come right off. Next step is removing the snap ring, or in some of the newer stuff they may have a plate with bolts on it. But you have to take out the back side of the spindle, so we can press the bearing out through the side of the hole. Okay, next we're going to press out the bearing. And this is the only time I'll tell you to press on the inside race. It will destroy the bearing, so you got to remember, don't ever press on the inside race unless it's supported from the other side. Unless you're pushing two races together, this will ruin a bearing. This is an old bearing, it's coming out, so I'm not worried about it. So here we go. Coming right out. That's a good thing. And our bearing is out the bottom. Okay, one thing I want to show you on the spindle is you have a snap ring groove right here, and there's some crusty rust inside here. Take some emery cloth, something looks like this, and clean it up. Make sure that snap ring groove is really clean inside there, because that snap ring has to go back in when we press in our new bearing. Okay, you want to check your new bearing. Make sure it looks like it's the right size before you go to try to press it in. It fits right in there. And in order to press that in, I took the old bearing and took it to the grinder and cut a little chamfer around the outside, so that when I press the new bearing in, I can push it all the way down to the snap ring groove and it won't get wedged in there. That way it's nice and smooth all the way down as far as it needs to go. Okay, we're pressing the bearing in, only pushing on the outside edge. I've got my chamfered bearing. It'll come down nice and straight. Okay, just stop moving. You want to stop right there. Then I'm going to knock that other bearing off. Final step is pressing the hub into the bearing. Now, if you look down side here, I'll show you this angle of it. I've got a socket supporting the inner race, and the races are touching together. And this is the only way you want to press the hub in, or you'll destroy the bearing. That bearing won't last 100 miles if you press against the race pushing the hub in. So, that thought in mind, I've supported the bottom, and then the hub is going to go in there on top like that. And I'm going to go ahead and give it a press. Down we go. And you'll feel it hit some resistance, and that is where you'll stop at once it shoulders out, right about there. It should spin nice and easy. We'll go back, put this back together, and be ready to go.